Have a seat. This is going to be an emotional podcast or two. How do you feel when you hear the words artificial intelligence or synthetic media, synthetic voices, deep fake, AI? How do you feel inside as a performer? Do you feel threatened? Do you feel confused, unknowing? We're going to talk in just a moment with one of my dearest friends in the industry, Anne Ganguzza of VOBoss and VOPeeps, about this very subject on this episode of the VOHeroes podcast. So, Anne Ganguzza, why in the world would you think I would not agree with something that you have to say?
Because you said, I know, thank you, but because you said, I forget how you phrased it, but you said the warnings for performers, which I'm totally all about that. I get that, but I wasn't sure. So, I'm treading lightly because I've taken some bold moves.
So we're talking about, here's what happened. I did a podcast episode.
Wait, are you recording right now? Can I blot?
I am recording right now, and I'm leaving that in. Okay? Listen.
Okay.
So I did a podcast episode on the difference between the term artificial intelligence and the term synthetic media or synthetic voices or synthetic faces.
Got it.
And I realized that there would be people who would immediately push back and say, you have no idea what you're talking about. You don't know the threat. You're like doing what you do and I'm struggling or something. And that's happened. And I think I know you, Anne, well enough, having worked with you many, many times in the past, and you know me well enough to know that neither one of us doesn't know what we're talking about when it comes to artificial intelligence.
Sure.
Both of us have worked in technology in the past. Both of us have worked with performance in the past. I mean, our paths have crossed this notion of a machine created voice or face in the last 10 years, many, many times. And then the other day we were in a session and I said, oh, Anne Ganguzza, she talks about this all the time. And I've been meaning to ask her to come on the podcast and talk about her thoughts on the supposed threat or the actual threat or the words, the concepts, just at a 30,000 foot view. And then someday in the future, we'll talk about specific things. But you said to me, I don't think you're going to agree with what I have to say. And I'm like, why would that be? So tell me.
Well, okay. So, it's been a process, right? I mean, you and I think we've always been lovers of technology, and I, having worked in it for well over 20 years, I always feel like I've been on the bleeding edge of it. And I am very much excited by it all the time. And I like to see the good that can come out of evolving technology, how it can help humankind. And I tend not to think of anything else that might be the darker side of it. Although not that I don't think about it, it's just that I don't choose to dwell on that, because I know, as being educated and knowing as much as I possibly can about it, I can then evolve along with it, as well as, no matter what I'm doing at the time. I mean, if I'm doing voiceover, if I'm working in technology, whatever it is, I want to evolve along with it and not necessarily push back and say no to it, because I'm not going to stop it. I wish I had that power, but actually, I wish I had that power not to stop the technology, but I just wish I had that power. But I'm not going to stop it. And, David, you're probably not going to stop it either. So I think it's imperative that, knowledge is power, that we educate ourselves and understand what the technology is and how we can work with it in order to benefit ourselves. And I think it's just something that if we keep our eyes on the technology, we can get in front of it.
Yeah. I think that oftentimes people will look at the result of using a piece of technology a negative result. I mean, a great example is, I don't know about you, but we made the arrangements to do this session today with a piece of technology that I adore, which is email. Email can be used for very evil purposes.
Sure.
Spam and phishing, and Lord knows what's going to be invented in the future, dropping scripts and so on. But the technology itself is not responsible for that. It's how people use the technology. And then there are concepts around synthetic voices that I would think some voice talent would welcome. You know, like they're going to do that's going to be used for like the crappy jobs that I don't want anyway. Or who knows? But as you talk to your clients and your students and your production partners, what has been what you've been hearing them say and you're concerned about when it comes to synthetic media? What are they saying and what are their misconceptions?
Well, I think, the first and foremost is those things that always seem to hit the media when there's talk about deep fakes. And there's examples of deep fakes. And then there's, the case of, for example, my voice got stolen, Bev Standing with the TikTok case. And, the thing about it is that in a lot of ways, at least having those issues, brought to light are good because they help to evolve and develop standards, guidelines, and laws. And so, what was, the really good thing that came out of the TikTok case is that it was settled. And that was a precedent-setting case for somebody's voice being used, without their permission. And I think that was just kind of a really wonderful thing that kind of set a precedent that opened up our eyes so that we can then begin to talk about and have a discussion about standards and guidelines and policies. And I think that this is our time to have a voice. It is the very Wild West, like people say, the Wild West of the beginning of this technology getting out there. Well, it's really not, but you know what I mean? Now that it seems to be a threat, but now is the time when we need to speak up and we need to, have an active voice in how our voices are being used, making sure that they're used ethically and that we get compensated fairly for them.
Yeah. One of the things that really disheartens me is when products that use artificial intelligence are painted with the broad brush of the clear emotional threat of synthetic voices. Artificial intelligence is used in so many products and so many things. And used in ways that often we don't even see, but we benefit from. And one of those products is positron. I go into audiobook narration Facebook groups, and it kind of reminds me of when ACX first came out, because I think maybe a month or two after everybody started hearing about ACX back in 2011, I was on a panel at SAG-AFTRA with some very established audiobook narrators who had already made the decision that ACX was evil, that it was a race to the bottom, that it was awful, how dare they? Because it was different. It was revenue share as opposed to flat rate. And that just didn't fit in their zeitgeist, in their world. And I see that happening today. When people mention positron, they immediately think of the artificial intelligence that's used with positron. And I happen to be a little bit closer to this issue than most people because I was on the phone call with our reps from SAG-AFTRA and the CEO of positron and their attorney when they in real time altered their terms of service to assure the people using positron they weren't going to be using the uploaded audio to create synthetic voices. They were only using artificial intelligence to make it better, comparing the manuscript with the voice. That's it. But that's not going to change the minds of people who are influencers. They're big names in the world of narration. And so when I see an Anne Ganguzza making eminent sense about this sort of thing, I just need to give you a little bit of a bigger platform and voice and let my followers and People know what you're thinking. And so I am relieved right now, because I thought you were going to say something really like unexpected and outrageous about this. And in fact, you have restored once again my worshipness of you and your brain and how it works. And so when somebody is having a conversation with you about this, and maybe they don't know how smart you are, maybe they don't know how well informed you are on this, and they immediately say, oh, artificial intelligence, bad. Synthetic, no, this is awful. This is going to kill us. I'm going to be out of a job in 5 years. What do you say?
Oh, goodness. Well, so, number one, it's that, education, knowledge is power. That is number one. I literally spent a year researching and interviewing people, CEOs of AI companies and people who are creating synthetic voices. So, number one, because I'm a technology buff and I kind of just am super interested in it, but also because it appeared, from everywhere that you read that it was an impending threat, and especially a threat to our industry. And, for me, I, have been in technology enough to know that there's, it's just, this is the way technology has evolved over the years. I mean, it happened with the music industry, right? When things went from, vinyl to digital, and then, things evolve. And so again, I knew when that was happening that I wanted to find out as much as I possibly could. And, to date, I have literally over 32 episodes that I've produced with different companies, with people all within the AI industry, talking, asking the questions and asking the tough question, asking the questions, well, how can I ensure that my voice won't be stolen? Or how can I ensure that it won't be used for, speaking copy that I would never speak, and eroding my brand in some way. And so by doing that, and by asking the questions, and actually by, taking these companies up on their offers to check out their websites, check out their voices, play around with it. I guarantee you all of these AI companies will let you have a free account so that you can play around with things to learn. It wasn't so much that I was like, oh, and I'm afraid, that they're going to take my voice. I mean, and I will say that, just like any other contract or any other thing that I would do in my voiceover business, I make sure that there are eyes on the contracts, making sure that my voice is protected, understanding what things I need to speculate in that contract to make sure that my voice is protected and not used for any other reason than it's supposed to be. And so through that process, and looking over contracts and having a lawyer look over contracts, I've come to have my own set of, okay, these are the guidelines. These are what I will accept. These are what I won't. And I feel safe proceeding in using the technology and in learning more about the technology. So when people come to me and say it's going to take my job away, well, I say it's going to actually add to your toolbox. And that's such a hard concept for people to understand, because all they see is like, no, it's going to take jobs away. Well, if we all evolve with the technology and move with the technology, we all are on a level playing field. And so we all have the opportunities to add to our toolboxes and add, voices for good. Not necessarily if you want to keep your voice, have a younger version of your voice, maybe donate your voice to somebody who, needs a voice, that sort of a thing. There's all sorts of wonderful things you can do with it. And so I encourage my students and people who ask me to really just educate. And I'm very thankful and grateful that I can point to, my VOBoss podcast, the episodes that are there. And I continue to do episodes on AI. I mean, it was supposed to just be a small series, but it ended up that the more I spoke to these people, the more they wanted to reach out to me, because again, they want to educate us. And just as the AI industry, wants to educate people about, don't be scared. This is what's happening. This is how we can use the technology for good. They need to be educated about our industry. They don't know how usage is, how we make contracts, how we have usage. And so they don't know as much about our industry as we don't know about theirs. And so I think by working together, that really can, again, help us to move forward and evolve with the technology instead of, pushing back and being left behind. I mean, I said evolve or die.
Evolve or die. All right, listen, I want to put a pin in this right now because this is clearly a bigger subject than one episode. And I'd like to have you come back in next week's episode or in the next episode in the series and discuss a little bit deeper this notion of the technology as it exists today and the technology as it may exist in the future. Anne Ganguzza, VOBoss. Are you still doing VOPeeps? I think you are. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. And looking gorgeous as normal with her huge Tim Tippett's booth in the background. And yeah, baby. I want you to smash the like button if you wouldn't mind, and maybe notify yourself when our episodes come out. We have a channel you can subscribe to. I'm David H. Lawrence, 17th. I thank you so much for watching and for listening to this episode of the VOHeroes podcast.